Thank you very much. I'm Joakim from FIBBL. I'm very excited to be here, and I want to extend huge gratitude to Max and Tatiana and DGG for arranging this event. At my RTS speech, I don't know if anyone here saw it, I presented from an unreal scene virtually. This will be the polar opposite. I have a sorry excuse for a slideshow. I apologize in advance. But yeah, it will be more me standing up here and yapping for you guys. At FIBBL, our mission is to create a digital product experience that exceeds the one of the physical world. That's the northern star for us. And we're focusing on the fashion industry and creating 3D assets to present on e-commerce and in marketing. So there exists a lot of interesting technologies to present and visualize your products in 3D. And I'm not here to talk about that at all. I'm here just to talk about the difficulty of scale. So the big problem that we're facing is like, how do we take 3D from being this niche pocket in the e-commerce sector to being available on every piece of clothing that we buy? If we imagine the output of physical products from the fashion industry, we industrialized the production of clothes 300 years ago, and the industry outputs like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of SKUs every year. So how do we keep up with that? That's the sort of target that we need to reach for. If we don't have a coverage of all products, then we have failed in digitalizing the fashion industry for the e-commerce. Yeah, so we have to industrialize. And before getting into the concept that we apply at FIBBL, I want to share a story from just 3 weeks ago. To test the philosophy that we have, we packed our van, our studio, and drove down to Milano, from Stockholm, Sweden, down to Milano, Italy, to attend MICAM, which is the largest fashion footwear trade show, according to themselves at least. So we created what we call the MICAM 3D Challenge. And that basically was a goal that we set to produce 100 shoes live there at the trade show. So after spending 4 hours setting up our studio in an office space that they very nice that they lent it to us, we started going around collecting shoes, offering to return the shoe with a link to the 3D experience. So if anyone's interested after our little event, just want to briefly show you guys. We set up a web page for the MICAM 3D Challenge. So here we have all of the 113 shoes we managed to collect and produce, and everything is here with all of the experiences. Fun fact, virtual try-on, SAC, we're using DPR, so you're live here on 113 shoes. Yeah, it's all here if anyone want to see how we did on that challenge. micam-shoes.fibbl.com. There, I'm going to make sure I'm back to my presentation. So we went around to different brands, resellers and designers. We built our pop-up studio. We had an incredibly small team there, proving that 3D production doesn't have to take that long, it doesn't have to be that expensive. We just need to approach it from a different perspective. So now on to our process, how we work, what's our philosophy in designing a 3D production pipeline. And here starts my sad little slideshow. Boom, industrialize. We need to streamline, cut off the fat, basically. So what I mean by that is 3D technologies and the development it's a very mature industry. We're really good at rasterizing polygons, so we can do it very efficiently. We're good at approximating material properties and doing light calculations. And we all have a concept, right, of what a good 3D model looks like. What is technically a good 3D model? What does good topology look like? And what is a good UV map? And we often get stuck in that line of thinking, building from the bottom up. We want to build the best possible 3D model we can, and then we want to deliver that. And I feel like we talk a lot about our poly counts, our topology, where do we put our our loops. What's the texture resolution? Do we compress them? Do we use KTX? What's the material properties? But I think we need to go in the other direction and talk about what's the target? What does the client talk about? Does the product look good? Does it represent my product? What's the load time on our product detail page if we put a 3D model there? Does it affect our SEO scoring? Is it omnipresent? And what I mean by that is, can we use it in a 3GS viewer? Can we render product images? Can we render videos? Can we use it in AR, in spatial computing? These are the things that our clients are talking about, and they don't really care how our topology looks. So my take on is starting at the delivery point. What do we need to deliver? What do the client want? And then apply first principle, work our way backwards. What do we need to do instead of building from the bottom up? I have a little black sheep take that I want to just run by you guys. In one case, bags, we deliver 3D models of bags. We know we're not going to animate it. We know we can compress a high-density mesh down to less than a megabyte. We know that any phone from the last 5 years is able to run it, render it in WebGL. So with that target in mind, why would I add a process where we have to do retopology on a bag that we scan with photogrammetry? Black sheep take, I know. I heard someone gasp, wonderful. But think about it. What's the deliverables for the client, and how do they experience the product? That's the only thing that matters. Yeah, so what is need to have in your process, and what is nice to have? And every process you put in your pipeline has to earn its place there. And after we streamlined, number 2, automate. Automate as much as you can, obviously, but don't do it immediately. Because if you start by automating steps, you might end up building in redundancies in your system for things that you maybe don't need or want down the line. So that's why we start by streamlining, building our pipeline backwards from our target, and then looking at the bottlenecks, like what are some of the manual tasks that we maybe can automate. I prefer not to work in the softwares that we use. Anything that we can automate with command line interface or APIs, everything should just, yeah, we don't want to work in our softwares, basically. Another thing to sort of think about is, can you run process in parallels? I know these boxes look bland because I didn't prepare very much, but this is our actual pipeline for one of our product categories. Yeah, run process in parallel. Maybe if there's manual step and automated steps that you can do in tandem to shorten the total production time of the 3D model. And then finally, standardize. Anything that we can't automate, we need to standardize. So if you have a process where you need a person to step in and do a manual task, we need everything to be predictable, replicable, and time efficient. And this is easy when you automate tasks because you can measure it and it goes the same every time. But if you have a person stepping in and doing part of the process, it needs to be documented, because you don't want one cog in your machine to be one person who sits on all of the knowledge and information. You want a documented process where anyone with X qualification, depending on the task, can step in and fill that role. Because if you don't, then you don't have an industrialized factory. So that's one of the things we learned and took away. I also, again, sorry for my sad presentation, have a bit of a fourth point that's not on here, but maybe that it encompasses everything that we've talked about. And that is to segment the objects that you're going to produce in a way that makes sense for an industrialized production. So one example is at FIBBL we produce bags, and we have a photogrammetry approach that is like the beginning of that pipeline. But producing a backpack or a briefcase or a handbag or a wash bag is very different. So create different pipelines for them. Because you can produce anything once, but if you're going to do 1,000 of them, it makes sense that everything gets its own pipeline that's designated for that type of object. It makes things a lot more efficient. So you need to look at your objects you're going to produce and what differentiate them, not from the client's perspective, what are our different product categories, but from a 3D production perspective, what are the things that differentiate the products? One thing I often see in the LinkedIn discourse is people looking for like a one-stop shop solution to producing 3D models. I see a lot of people start working with photogrammetry when they see the power of it. They run into the drawbacks of photogrammetry and discard it, and then look in another direction. And I think this is not a good approach in an industrialized pipeline. You have to have several processes that you run. And in our case, photogrammetry can be extremely powerful in some parts of the pipeline. But then you take the drawbacks into account, prepare for that, build your pipeline around that so you can accommodate the drawbacks. So it's not a one-stop solution. You need to think through how you handle stuff like transparent parts or highly reflective surfaces. You can plan for this and still use photogrammetry. So yeah, that is my take on the art and science of trade-offs. It's about making concessions to, as I said in the beginning, with industrialized physical production, we have to sacrifice a bit of craftsmanship for mass production. And yeah, it's about knowing what not to do, what to leave out of your pipeline, and what are the tools that we apply in our processes. So I think that's sort of how we meet the demand of industrial physical production of goods. Thank you.